All right, good afternoon, and welcome to the very first episode of the Romeo Podcast, where we discuss a variety of Army career fields and how you can take advantage of a similar career path for yourself. I'm your host, Sergeant First Class Williams, and today we will be covering West Point ahead of the Army vs. Navy game. Joining me on today's show is my Operations OIC, Captain McGinn, and my Battalion XO, Major Haas. Welcome.
Thanks.
Sir, ma'am.
Yeah,
glad to have you.
Yeah.
So first off, let's start with how did you end up at West Point? What year did you graduate from West Point? And, going a little bit about like what life was when you were at West Point. Let's start with 03s first, captains first.
Starting with me first. All right. Well, first I was a 2018 graduate. I got to West Point through soccer. I was recruited at a soccer camp down in North Carolina. Funny enough, I was already committed to another school in Nashville at the time. The coaches were just kind of like, hey, just come check it out. Let's see, if it could be a fit for you. Kind of, we want to show you our program. So I went. Absolutely fell in love with the team. The girls were so welcoming. The coaching staff was really what I was looking for, playing at the next level. And I really didn't know much about West Point, but just kind of being there you could tell that there was a rich history, that the long gray line was more than just going to a school and playing a sport, but it was kind of something that you embodied. And I really liked that. I liked the idea of having a little bit of structure, because I wasn't the best academically, admittedly. And so that next week, I kind of sat down, I talked with my parents, decided that it was the best fit for me in playing at the next level. So I called the Belmont coach, was like, hey, I'm sorry to do this, but I'm decommitting and I'm committing to West Point. And they were very supportive of it. They were very supportive of, taking that step into going not only to playing at the next level, but also having that serving your country portion after I graduated. So that's really how I got to West Point.
So it sounds like West Point won you over.
They did.
Like you really wanted to go somewhere else first.
Yes.
And then once you got to the campus at West Point, it was just like, nah, I'm doing this. Did you think about anything Army-wise? Like, yeah, I'm coming to play soccer, but did you think like, what am I doing here? I know once I'm done, I'm going into the Army and I'm going to be serving.
Yeah, I think 17-year-old Madison didn't really kind of grasp that next level. After I was done playing soccer, I think in my mind, I was just like, I want to play at the next level. This is a Division I program. The school has all this rich history. I don't think it really set in until, you affirm and you're like, wow, okay, I will be serving the next 5 years when I graduate. Yep. So I don't think I really embodied what it meant until I was already there and had already kind of been in West Point and in the thick of it.
Now, I may be overstating, but I don't think if the audience doesn't already, I don't think they realize it's not easy to get into West Point, one, and then it's not easy to play a sport there, right? So yeah. you do have to be pretty good in high school because they just don't take everybody, right, to play a sport at West Point.
Definitely, yeah. I don't remember my GPA really or what my SAT scores were, but I know that the coaching staff and the admissions office was able to work with what I had in high school and get me in direct.
All right, sir, floor's yours. How did you end up at West Point?
Yeah, so I'm a class 2013, and I knew I was going to be in the Army some way, shape, or form. Didn't have anybody that was immediate family in the Army, but my great-grandfather served in World War II. He never told us stories, but he always had like a shadow box up above the mantle, and he did like a family staff ride in 1999 with my mom when I was a kid, and came back and told stories, and then applied to a bunch of ROTC programs, but didn't decide on West Point until I was 12 years old, 11 years old. I went to the 2003 graduation. We had a family friend that went, saw the parade, saw all the seniors or the firsties walking out, separating themselves, saw a bunch of moms crying, a bunch of aunts and uncles there. And I was like, man, this, like you said, there's something here. There's something big here. You got statues of presidents and generals all over the place. So when I was 11 or 12 years old, I was like, I'm going to be in the Army and I'm going to do it this way. I didn't know what that entailed. The next couple of years were a little bumpy getting in, but yeah, getting in the Army one way or the other, West Point seemed like the best way to do it.
Nice. The process of getting into West Point, what was that like? Who did you have to interview with? Are there any special letters of recommendation that you need to get into West Point and to be ahead of the pack?
Yeah, so I was not nearly as talented as Madison coming out of high school. I did not get the VIP treatment. My junior year of high school, I had to go on to westpoint.edu and go to the cadet portal, and you sign up. And they're already asking for your transcripts as a junior. And you're plugging in your grades, the classes you're taking. And even before that, when I was a freshman in high school, we'd look to see like, hey, who gets into West Point? What do you have to do? And so we found you need to play a team sport, you need to play an individual sport. Physical fitness is a big thing there. And leadership, if that's clubs, church groups, whatever it is, that's really what they're looking for in younger kids. And so just kind of, like I said, as a 12-year-old, I knew I was going to get there. So loved playing football, played that all through elementary and high school. That was my true sport. And then I did some swimming and track to kind of augment that, make my packet a little better, make me a little more rounded individual. And then, yeah, it was essays, interviews. I talked with a couple grads in my area, old grads. They were graduates probably in the 70s or 80s. So
Oh, wow.
Old dudes. And I'm there like 16 years old. I'm like, hey, I want to go. And they're like, okay, this is what it was like. And then I think we wrote 3 or 4 essays. I say we, it was me and my family telling the story of who I am, where I came from, and why the Army meant so much to us, even though we didn't have anybody that was immediately serving.
So in both of you guys' expertise, just officer expertise, and then having worked in recruiting a little bit for myself, I think I understand the tiers when kids are coming in and they want to go officer route, right? Like who the priorities. I know like OCS is like, it's like down at the bottom, right? Like I think it's West Point.
Yeah.
They want West Point selections first, then they go to ROTC, and then they go to OCS. Was that an accurate?
Yeah, at least that's how they do branching.
Yeah.
And then like active duty, everybody from West Point's active duty. You're not going to get a reserve contract or anything like that. If they're going to invest 4 years in you, you're going to pay the 5 years on the backside.
Yeah.
Speaking of branching, ma'am, what was your branch?
So originally I was a transportation officer. Once I hit 03, they kind of group all of the logistics, ordnance, transportation, quartermaster into one. And you just become a 90 Alpha, which is a pure logistics officer.
And that's the one you wanted, or did you have, because I think you guys get like a wish list
Yep.
of branches when you're at school, right?
And they do. So I did want some form of logistics. I actually really wanted quartermaster. However, in my class year, and I think most class years, quartermaster goes out pretty high in your OML, which is just your class rankings. So I went with transportation because after talking with a bunch of people, they're like, hey, you all do the same thing. You can kind of get ETPs for anything you want to do that's like specific to, let's say, quartermaster, if you want to be like a rigger or something of that nature. So I ultimately just went with transportation because I knew I would get it. And from that point on, I pretty much did everything ordnance related because I was in maintenance my entire time in my first duty station. So
I was maintenance. I came in as
Nice.
a 92 Alpha, so we both share the same branch, so to speak. So we uniquely in terms of the battle space, right? How they say, you win wars on logistics. Major Haas is an infantry officer.
Yep.
So we kind of got the best of both worlds here, right? We have an infantry officer, and then we have a logistics officer. I don't think you can probably come up with a better combination here today. So did you originally wanted infantry as your branch when you were at West Point, sir?
Yeah, I was painfully ignorant as a cadet coming in. I just knew there was Army, and that's what I was going to do. Everything that I learned about jobs, branches, posts, all of that was on the fly at West Point. I just knew I was that kid that was going to join the Army no matter what. If I didn't get into RTC, I was going to walk into a recruiting station. But the infantry, once I got there and realized, okay, this is what everybody thinks of the Army. The dudes carrying the rucksacks around in the wood line. That's what I loved doing as a kid. That's what I loved doing as a cadet. And so I was all infantry all the way.
Nice. Well, I guess we'll stay with you, sir. What was life like at West Point, day-to-day life? Did they go over, I know you guys touched a bit on the history, but what was the history like of them like ingraining in it to you? And then what was day-to-day life from like freshman, sophomore, senior, junior, what have you?
Yeah, so our day is the first day you show up.
Yeah.
That's where everybody shows up in civilian clothes, and they sit you down in Ike Theater with your family. They're like, you have 90 seconds to say your goodbyes. And then everybody stands up and gives a hug, and they walk you out onto a bus. And that's from then on, there's upperclassmen yelling at you, sit down, carry your bag, do this, do that. And that first day was such a blur because you get your hair cut, you get uniforms, you get taught how to march. They also do the reporting to the cadet in the red sash, which is the stereotypical step up here, do this, da, 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 and you've got to do it exactly or they'll kick you back and have to do it again. So from the get-go, they let you know, hey, this is a big deal. You've got to be a part of our culture. Whoever you were beforehand, this is how we do stuff here. And then at the end, I think I told you, they do a parade at the end where they've got all these. So I don't know how big your class was. We had like 1,400 kids showed up for our day.
Ours was about the same.
Shaved heads, brand new dress uniforms, marched out, and then saluted, and then marched us back in. And then we started Beast Barracks, which is West Point's version of basic training.
Mm-hmm. Would you agree with that, man?
Yeah.
Your experience was the same?
Yeah, pretty much the same. I think one thing that I had a little different is being with soccer, you're with all of the girls in your entire class. So you're kind of going through it together. And beforehand, you do like a little, like the day before, we all met up, met a lot of the players on the team. So when we were going through stuff, like being yelled at and doing cadet in the red sash, you could kind of look around and you would see like one of your teammates or one of the upperclassmen on the soccer team, and they would just kind of give you a little wink and be like, okay, like it kind of like allowed you to relax a little bit and be like, okay, this is part of the experience. You just have to kind of get through it. So that's where I would say my experience differed a little bit, is I had a little bit more of a support system around me
nice.
From the get-go, which makes a huge difference.
So like the day-to-day battle rhythm, does it feel like a very elite, top-notch military academy? Like, of course, you guys have class, but then you also have to do Army stuff. You have to learn how to march.
I would say
you have to learn all of the same basic stuff that we're essentially probably learning in basic training as well.
Yeah, I would say they do a really good job. In the summers, you're doing Army stuff. You're doing training. You're going to schools. You're going airborne, that kind of stuff. But during the school year, it's a 100% academic institution.
Okay, interesting.
I didn't realize that getting in. I got in and like the first part of Beast, you're just taking assessments, taking tests. Like this is a math test. This is how you score in foreign languages. Blah 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 blah. And I remember getting into plebe year, getting into my first class, and everybody's all dressed up in their as for class, and you're sitting there ready to go. And I was like, I am not smart enough for this. Like all of these people here are smarter than I am. I'm here to do Army things, and this is not what I expected. So that was a definite wake up call getting into the academic sphere.
I would definitely say too, West Point has its isms where it took me a long time to grasp them at first. Like if you're a freshman, which we just call plebes, you can't talk outside unless you're talking to an upperclassman, and you have to walk around with your hands cupped. And oddly enough, you have to walk on the wall when you're inside of a building, which it took me a really long time to get that. And again, luckily I had the soccer team around me. So like when you would see an upperclassman, you would just like run up to him and be like, all right, walk me to class so that I don't have to do these things. But I would get yelled at all of the time because I would be walking around outside without my hands being cupped, or I'd be just walking in a building and not be on the wall. And I couldn't grasp it at first. So I would say that's some of the West Point isms that people like don't really realize. And I think that just dates back to tradition kind of. teaches you a little bit of discipline, and like once you get it just becomes second nature.
Were there any like upperclassmen that you just like, I really can't stand this person? Like they really played into the upperclassism.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we talk about classes, plebes, freshmen. You were in the Corps of Cadets, but you were a fourth class cadet, like you were a fourth class citizen. So all of the duties, you had to take out the trash. You had to get up in the morning early and announce like, hey, formation's in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
This is the uniform. Formation's in 5 minutes. This is the uniform. So there's definitely a earning your keep and definitely an indoctrination piece. There's also, we were talking about beforehand, the knowledge. There's a book that you have to memorize during Beast. And at any point during your freshman year, somebody can come in and be like, hey, how many days or what are the days? And be like, sir, there are 105 days until Army beats Navy. There are 106 days until yearling winter weekend. And you've got to rattle it all off. And some upperclassmen, that is their entire identity is I'm going to beat down these freshmen or these plebes and let them know like, hey, welcome to a new society. This is how we operate. I don't think you were in a hot company.
No.
Well, you had soccer,
relaxed.
so you had a way to get out of it. I was in.
What's a hot company?
So when I was a plebe, I was in 4th Regiment, and that was known as like the cool, relaxed. They're just here to do school and do Army. 1st Reg, I heard horror stories of the kids that I was in Beast with. We all got split out across all the friends you made that summer. You just get scattered across the Corps of Cadets. So I only knew 2 or 3 people from that basic training period that went into the academic year companies with me. And those guys that were in my platoon during Beast, they were doing extra duties. They were having to get up early and stand in formation 20 minutes early and recite knowledge. I was in a company that was mostly rugby players, super relaxed. And the only things they asked me are what's for breakfast? And then when do I graduate? And be like, you have 245 days, you have 38 days, whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Would it be inaccurate if someone liking West Point to Hogwarts and kind of felt like there's some Harry Potterish?
The the Hogwarts, what's it called? The mess hall, the dining hall was inspired by the cadet mess hall.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
nice.
Super tall ceilings. There's a mural on one of the wings, and then you're all seated by your company. So tables of 10
or teams.
Yeah,
sports teams.
Sports teams all sit together, and then your company. So like 1st Reg has a row, 4th Reg has a wing, and everybody eats breakfast and lunch at the same time.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And that's another thing too. We have like spirit dinners.
Yep.
So the plebes and yucks would have to dress up as something, or they have to like stand on their chair and yell something, whether it be the company motto, or I guess when we have corn chowder, they like stand up with the bowl over their head and like try to hold the word corn for as long as possible.
And rowdy.
Yeah.
Talk about 4,000 kids just shaking tables, banging knives.
Stuff against the floor.
It's awesome. If you can get in for a meal, that's probably one of the best experiences.
Yeah, I give mad props to the servers and the cooks and stuff at West Point, because they had to endure a lot of craziness that if you weren't in it, it would look like absolute chaos.
It is. Because if you look, we were talking about spirit dinners, like we had to dress up in a costume every Thursday night for spirit dinner, and we also had to come up with some form of entertainment for the upperclassmen. So it'd be like a slideshow of destinations, or we'd have to do research on Army posts, and we'd have to tell them who has the best cost of living or who has the best unit. We did one of the funniest ones we did is me and my roommates did a dating match service where we try to match the people in our table to who we think their ideal match was. And that went over really well. So all the other tables in the company had to do that the next week, where the underclassmen matched the upperclassmen. But again, if you walked in on a Thursday night and we're expecting people to eat dinner, sometimes you've got chairs stacked up on tables. You've got kids doing skits, like reciting Shakespeare on the table. It is absolutely wild.
Can we go through plebes, yucks, and the other names in their relation to which class, what they mean?
Yeah.
You know where they came from at all, or?
Vaguely. Do you want to take it, or do you want me to take it?
You got it.
So plebes, plebeians in society, I think it's ancient Roman or ancient Greek society. The plebes were the lowest class. Yucks are yearlings, so like an animal, the yearling, like after a year of growth before they leave, like a baby deer lives with their mom for a year, and as a yearling they separate. And then your cows are juniors. The rumor is that the phrase "where the cows come home" is from cows at West Point. So you couldn't take leave in the old days. Your first 2 years, you weren't able to go back home until your junior year. And I don't know why they call them cows. And then seniors, they're first class cadets, so they call them firsties.
Oh, okay.
So firsties, cows, yucks, and plebes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. So Army Navy week,
Oh,
Yes.
best week of the year.
like probably I'm a Brown Steelers fan, where I'm a Browns fan, and the Brown Steelers rivalry, right? And so I gotta imagine like Army Navy, and plus I've been in the Army for a lifetime, right? And so we understand how important this week is. And can you expound for the audience, as West Pointers, like why it's so important? When did the rivalry start, if you know? And then why is this rivalry so important versus, Air Force? Like why
Wasn't
Navy?
it 1890? It was 1890.
Yep.
The rivalry began. The cadet, I don't know his first name, but Mikey, which is what our stadium's named after, basically accepted a challenge from a naval cadet, and they played like the first football game on the plain, which is the giant grass area in the middle of our campus, which no one can walk on.
Yeah.
It's
Verboten.
reserved. Yeah, it's reserved for just parades
Yep.
and like special events and stuff like that. And I think our jump team might practice on it.
They do.
But that's kind of where the tradition began. And then from that point, it was just something that happened every single year. I would say Navy's more important just because of how far the rivalry goes back, where Air Force wasn't created until well after that.
Yep.
So we have a lot less time with that rivalry. I will say both are really important in terms of getting the Commander-in-Chief trophy, which if you receive the Commander-in-Chief trophy, it's a service academy that has won against Navy and Air Force.
Yep.
So I think we hold that right now.
Yeah.
And then if we beat Navy on Saturday, we'll receive it again.
We'll keep it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Interesting.
She's right. 1890, the first game, and it was Mikey that accepted the challenge.
Yeah.
We didn't have a football team. Navy had already had a football team for a couple years, and the cadets were like, "Yeah, we will play you in football. Come to the plane and we'll play." So I think it was the first 5 or so games were played at the plane. And obviously all the locals would come watch the game, and they're like, "Oh, this is an awesome tradition." And then it got bigger and bigger and bigger to where now it's the greatest rivalry in sports, hands down.
It is
Hands down.
It is a very big one. So last year, we're for the audience, we're in Columbus, Ohio, Columbus Recruiting Battalion. Obviously, we have Major Haas, our XO, is a West Point grad. I'm not sure. I think you were running 2 company at the time, ma'am. Yeah,
Yes,
she wasn't up here yet.
Nope.
And so Travis, who's off camera, right? He's our social media engineer. We came up with an idea to do a reel and a photo op with the Naval Command on DSCC as well, who has a recruiting command down the road. And so I pitched the idea to them first, right? And they were like, "Yeah, sure, as long as you're not trying to make us look stupid, we're all for it, right? We'll help you get to." I talked to their PAO, and he was like, "Yeah, this is cool." I come to Major Haas, and Major Haas he used more colorful language, but he's like, "I'm not taking pictures with them. Like, we're not friends with them. I don't care about." And so I had to do a lot of convincing to Major Haas because I could tell as a West Point grad, it was a big deal to you.
Yeah.
I think I've got a little more hate in my heart because the 4 years that I was there, it was the end of the longest losing streak to Navy.
Yeah.
They won 14 or 15 years straight from 2002 to 2015. And every year I remember getting all hyped up. This is the year. This is our year. We're going to play better. Plebe year, we got absolutely demolished. Yuck year, we got a little bit better. Cow year, we were close. We were only, I think, down a field goal or down a touchdown. And then my first year, we were on the 1 yard line with the ball to score the go-ahead touchdown, and we fumbled, and they returned at 98 yards. And that was the last Army Navy game I went to. That was the taste I had in my mouth. All the excitement, all the fun. And then the Squids just thought they were kings of the world.
Yeah.
They didn't care about March On. They didn't care about any other sports. They were absolutely garbage at everything, but they won that football game for so long, they thought they were untouchable.
Yeah.
So now any chance to rub it in their face, now that the Army has a decent team and we're done winning the war on terror where Navy was just floating around in the ocean doing whatever it is they do, we joke about it.
Shots fired.
Yeah, I don't have anything to back this up, but I'd be willing to bet that when you look at the service requirement after each academy, when you talk about going to the Navy during GWAT versus going to the Army, everybody in the Army, they deployed from that 2002 to 2015 timeframe. And the Navy deployed as well, but that's a different experience. The Marines and some of your special operators are the only ones in the Navy that were actually in combat and closing with the enemy.
I was shocked to see. I saw CBs when I was downrange, and I remember going up to them. It's like, what are you doing here? What are you? There is no water around. I was a young buck sergeant at the time, and they were like, dude, we're not all on water.
No.
So I imagine they probably
Afghanistan's
they probably get
landlocked.
annoyed by stuff like that.
Oh, I'm sure.
Ma'am, does the rivalry exist in other sports as well? Was there rivalry there with soccer as well?
Yeah, you basically plan all year to beat Navy. We call them star matches. So if you beat one of the other service academies, so Navy or Air Force, we have these letter jackets that have like a varsity A on them, and you get the stars sewn into them for how many times you've beat the service academy. So Air Force is a silver star, Navy is a gold star.
Yep.
So you basically play all year to kind of win these stars. So I would say they're just as big of rivalries across every other sport.
Yeah, when I played sprint football, so same rules as football, but everybody weighs 172 pounds or less. Not a lot of teams play it, but Army and Navy are the two big teams. They win the championship on and off every year.
Okay.
And when I was on the team, we built our defense to stop Navy. Like we'll handle everybody else, but we built the defense to stop Navy's offensive attack to make sure that we would win that game. And so I only got one star, beat Navy my senior year, but that's one of the best memories I've got. I don't have a lot of cadet paraphernalia left. I've got a handful of things, but one of them is the jacket with that gold star on it.
Yeah.
Did you care to state your record when you were there?
I know this is going to sound bad. We beat Air Force once, and I believe we beat Navy once in my 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah. So not a great record against them, but the team now has beat them every single time they played. So shout out to AWS and Army Women's Soccer because they're absolutely crushing it this year.
Yeah.
Nice.
So USAA is the main sponsor for the Army Navy game, but they also track all of the other sports. So when you come in, there's the board where it says national champion, conference champion, this, that, and the other. It'll say they'll have those championships and also have, hey, they beat Navy. They won this game. So they update that throughout the semester, throughout the year of when you beat Navy. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what team you're on. Like that's the opponent you've got to beat.
Yeah.
Nice.
The bragging rights. Yeah. So I would say, living in Columbus for 2 years, the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry is the one everybody talks about. It's a big deal.
Yes, it is.
It's completely different than Army-Navy because you guys won't even say Michigan. You guys won't even wear blue or yellow or bring it in. We're the exact opposite, and then everything is beat Navy.
Yeah.
Beat Navy, beat Navy. We say it day in, day out. If you're in trouble, like, why did you do that? Beat Navy.
Yeah.
That's the go-to answer, and they'll be like, all right. Got it. Okay.
We have traitors in this state, by the way. It's when you're from Ohio, we're one of the few states when you're born and raised here, you're raised here to root for. You don't pick other teams. That's just if you wanted to root for another team, you should have been born somewhere else.
Yeah.
You will root for the Browns or the Bengals, and you will root for OHIO. We have some Steelers fans. Yep, you guys are listening. And we have some Michigan fans here, but they,
I would say that's the cooler thing about Army is didn't go to West Point, but you still watch the Army-Navy game.
For sure.
All of the enlisted guys I worked
Team
with.
Army.
They love to rag on West Pointers. We've got a bad rap. Some some bad cadets turn into bad officers.
Yeah.
Same for ROTC and OCS, but that's a smaller population of West Pointers. And so they'll rag on it, but at the same time, I still get texts, hey, sir, are you watching the Army-Navy game? Like,
Yeah.
absolutely, I'm watching the game.
I think it helps too. It's the only game that's on.
That's why it's the best
On
rivalry. It's got its
Saturday.
That is
own,
a
it's
good
got its
point.
own
So,
I
yeah.
think the
weekend.
audience knows that as well.
The college
Yeah.
football playoffs doesn't start until everyone has a bye, so
Yeah.
we're the only game that's on. So that definitely helps fuel the kind of rivalry because it's what else are you gonna watch? Like, okay, let's tune into America's rivalry.
It's also not geographically isolated. So I grew up in North Carolina, and everybody's split between UNC, Duke, NC State, all within that area. Army, all 50 states, cadets from all over the world, cadets from all over the country. And once you get into that Army club, that Army brotherhood or that sisterhood, that's across boundaries. So it doesn't matter if I'm stationed in Alaska, I would get emails from the guy that graduated in 1991. Hey, we're watching Army Navy downtown at the Civic Center. You're invited. So that stuff happens everywhere.
I actually just got an email like that from the Indiana parents associations. Like, hey, we're watching the Army Navy game. They rent out a big spot. You go, you pay for a ticket, and then you get food, drinks, that kind of stuff. So I would say that every state kind of runs, if their graduate kind of chain is good in that state, will have something going on.
Yeah, I think that's one of the cool things. Every branch has their history and their legacy. But for us, even just in duty uniform, right? We wear our story on our uniform. You see a unit patch, you can tell where that person is at that moment. You see their combat patch, you can tell where they've been. You see a special skill tab, they've been to which, by the way, you've been to Ranger School, sir. So can you talk a little bit about, since we're going to be segueing into, for the audience, if they want to take advantage of the officer route and go on West Point and what they can look forward to, how they should get mentally prepared, physically prepared. Talk a little bit about your experience as an Army officer and how you ended up at Ranger School. Yeah,
definitely. I would say West Point prepared me better than any other place could have for being an Army officer. We talk about beating Navy all the time. We also talk about, hey, when you're a lieutenant, when you're a platoon leader, when you're in charge, that starts from day one. Mm-hmm. All the caveats, all the professional military ethics, all the tactical classes, all of that's framed around you're going to be a leader in 4 years. And I don't think that happens at an ROTC program. Like I said, you get great officers from everywhere. But West Point is solely designed to get you ready academically, physically, and tactically to be an Army leader. Going infantry, knowing that was the place I wanted to go, I was always volunteering for the what do they call it? The brutal assignments, like trying to be operational force or op 4 for training, going to airborne, going to Ranger School. But once you graduate, your commission, your butter bar looks just like everybody else's. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you roll up to IBOLC with all of your classmates, people from OCS, people from ROTC. So once you commission, an officer is an officer. What the work you put in beforehand, that's on you and what you want to do going forward.
Do you guys have opportunities to go to special skilled schools while at West Point? Yeah. Same like ROTC? Okay.
Yeah, so it's
it's recommended, I imagine, right?
Yeah, so what Major Haas was kind of talking about before, that's something we do in the summertime. So they keep all of the military stuff pretty much tailored to the summer, so you can put in for air assault, airborne, combat dive. You can do all of those schools through West Point. West Point actually opened their own air assault school.
Really?
Yeah, down by the river.
Camp Smith?
Yeah, no, on post,
really?
But down by the river. Cool. They completely revamped it. They put an air assault obstacle course and everything, so that they can funnel more cadets through that and make it a little easier. Airborne's a little more difficult to get. You kind of have to be in the top of your class, or depending on how many slots your company gets, because each company gets a certain amount of slots, your TAC officer has to kind of recommend you for it. it's definitely something that I wish I would have taken advantage of, because it's a lot harder to go to those schools as a logistics officer at Fort Bliss than it is for an infantry officer coming out of Fort Benning and going to Fort Bragg or Campbell.
Yeah, that was the first taste of the real Army I had. So I went 2009, I went to Beast, did all of that, did the cadet thing, did a year of school, unreal course load. And then when it finally got to the summer, I was like, this is it. We're going to do Army stuff. I'm excited. And I put in for airborne, got to go down to airborne school, went down to Fort Benning, and was rudely awakened to how rough the Army actually could be. The black hats there found out we were cadets, found out we were from West Point, and they're like, oh, tell us all your knowledge. Tell us all the things you know. Oh, do you eat with your fork? Do you going to tuck the napkin into your shirt? Meanwhile, the privates are over there just wolfing it down, being unbothered. But yeah, going to airborne in the summer was a great opportunity. They also did a thing, I think it was a class of 2016, where they could go to Sapper or Ranger school in the summer before you graduated. So there are a couple guys I knew that took advantage of that, but there's a lot of risk with injuries and getting recycled, because obviously if you recycle late in the summer, you're not going to get to finish Ranger school. You got to come back to school.
Yeah.
So they canked that after a couple years, but.
So again, we are currently in Columbus Recruiting Battalion. Major Haas is our battalion XO. Captain McGinn is our operations OIC, formerly 2 companies recruiting commander. What advice would you have for any 17? What's the target market for? It's not 17 to 34 if they want to go, West Point or
you've got to be
ROTC, of course.
You got to be under 24.
Yeah, 17 to 24.
24 is a cutoff.
Can't be married, can't have any dependents, can't have any kids.
Roger.
There are a lot of there's a handful of prior service people that make it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that 17 to 24-year-old that's looking to set themselves apart.
Yeah.
If they know they want to serve, West Point will find a way to get you to serve. In the Army as a cadet, they do all kinds of, we didn't even talk about in the summers, if you're not doing military training or you have to do like soccer stuff in the summer.
Yeah.
We did stuff for sprint football as well, but there's also academic training where they can send you overseas. Like I had a buddy that built a well in Uganda his sophomore year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Because he was an engineering major, civil engineering major. And they're like, hey, we've got this project. Do you want to go on this? And he was like, yeah, absolutely. I want to go.
Yeah.
But yeah, if anybody's looking to make a difference and test to see if they can stand up to it's probably the hardest thing I've done.
So, yeah, definitely, without a doubt. And I know for me, I wasn't the best academically in high school. Definitely not the best academically at West Point. But another option that we didn't really touch on is the prep school.
Yeah.
So if you are kind of feeling like you don't know that you can get in direct, or you may need a little extra help, the prep school is always a great option to look into. And essentially you do 1 year, still going to school. They have the same sports teams, as West Point does. So a lot of like players and non-direct admits will go there for a year. You also can go to prep schools. I had some friends that went to prep schools in Georgia and did a year there and then came to West Point. So there's definitely different options to look into. It's not just an end all be all like, hey, if you don't get in and you apply and that's something that you really want to do, there's definitely other options. You just need to work with the West Point administration or admin office to kind of get those options laid out for you. But there's tons of resources.
Yeah. And our recruiters here can also help with that because we get credit for a West Point contract. So if we write somebody as a contract and they find out they want to go to West Point, then we still get credit for that. So we've had a couple people that we interviewed for OCS that wanted to be an officer, did the packet with us, got everything, and they said, oh, I learned about West Point from our recruiter. Is that a good option? Absolutely. If you want training and education, go to West Point.
Definitely.
Can you guys talk about some of your experience between the ranks of second lieutenant, first lieutenant, captain, and then a course major, sir, because you are a major? Some of your experiences, that you went through at your time in the Army up to this point.
That's West Point related or something that I learned there?
Army related.
Army related.
Operational Army. Little advanced, for maybe a bulk of the audience, but we have a wide range of listeners. So
yeah, definitely. I would say West Point doesn't prepare you for a specific branch; they prepare you to be a leader. And the ultimate goal is to get that commission. I don't know if this is the same for you. We'd be walking around, and then somebody that graduated last year would be walking around with their like maroon beret because they were in the 82nd and they had that butter bar on you. Like, oh my God, look.
Yeah.
There he is.
Yeah. Definitely.
He made it through the 47 months. So yeah, there's always that end state. And then when it hits you, when you graduate, like, oh man, this is it. Like I've got to be the leader now. But like I said, they all go to Bolick. I was lucky that my Bolick class, the timing of the year was towards the middle of fall. Mm-hmm. It was a third West Point, a third ROTC, and a third OCS. So we had a good mix of all the different commissioning sources. And of course, every NCO is like, all right, everybody at West Point, raise your hand. You all suck. Everybody that's OCS, you're cool. ROTC, we'll see. We'll see what you guys are. But yeah, the training.
You gotta love the Army infighting.
Yeah. And I mean, granted, all of my training came from infantry NCOs, which are not the kindest, gentlest souls in the Army. They're looking to sort the wheat from the chaff. But yeah, I would say just looking back on those early ranks, like getting assigned as a platoon leader in Alaska for my first duty station, after going through Bolick and Ranger School, it was easy compared to like you're talking about the academic load. Like my freshman and sophomore years, I had 21 or 22 credits per semester, which is more than my brother took in like 3 years at App State. Shout out to App State. They got a great RTC program.
15 is too much.
Yeah. I think 12 is full time.
Yeah. And some people was like, I'm doing 12. I'm not doing.
One semester I had like 21 credit hours. Yeah. It was insane.
Everyone tries that 15 or 18 right, and they're like, never again.
Yeah.
I'm not doing that again. It'll be 12 from here on out.
It does lighten up once you get into your actual major. Yeah. So it's weird because all of your core classes at the beginning and then your engineering track that you're required to take, everybody graduates with a Bachelor of Science. So it doesn't matter if you studied art, history, language, you get a Bachelor of Science in language. So like I was an econ major, but I got a Bachelor's of Science because of all the core curriculum and then the mechanical engineering track that I took.
Okay.
So like that, let's say your first 3 years is a normal college degree. Yep. And then the back half, you get to study the stuff you want to study.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Definitely.
Along with the required history classes, international relations classes, PE classes, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Nice. What was it like as a logistics officer, ma'am? Did you enjoy it? I like logistics.
I did. Logistics has set me up very nicely. I've enjoyed everything that I've done in the Army thus far. To a point, I was in a forward support company in Fort Bliss with 11 AD. And my first battalion, we were infantry, so I got that kind of... got to hang out with the guys who'll just run through a brick wall and won't look back. That was always a good time. And then we transitioned to armor. That was another beast in itself because we had to divest all of our infantry equipment and field all of our armor equipment. So it kind of changed in the dynamic of individual that you had coming into the battalion, going from solely infantry guys that you give them a thing of water, a thing of fuel, and a box of MREs and watch them run around in the desert for a week or so.
Disappear, yeah.
To armor where they require a lot more resources and a lot more hands-on attention. And so that was definitely a learning curve for me. I think it prepared me for anything that I could possibly want to do in the Army and outside of the Army, just taking on those tasks. I think Major Haas was kind of spot on when he said you walk into your first like room or platoon, whatever, and the NCOs kind of like, all right, West Pointers, raise your hand. All right, OCS, raise your hand. Yep. All right, ROTC, we'll see how you do, kind of thing, which is funny. It's funny and it's not funny at the same time, but I definitely think that West Point kind of set us up for the leadership aspect. I definitely had a lot more leadership challenges just with like soldier personnel and managing a large platoon. I think my first platoon was 95 people because I had the entire maintenance section. And so I dealt with a lot of, conflicting personalities and a lot of issues, just soldier related issues. And I think West Point really set me up to kind of cross those hurdles, where I don't know that ROTC or OCS really get that kind of knowledge right off the bat, because they don't do a lot of Army stuff throughout the year like we do. So I think that's like a huge benefit of it. But all in all, I would say I really enjoyed my time like in the Army. We all know I'm on my way out. So I'm looking forward to kind of taking what I've learned from the Army and taking it into project management on the civilian sector.
You want to talk more about your transition out of the Army? How the Army has prepared you for your transition?
Yeah.
It's gotten a lot better over the years. I mean, I'm in my 21st year, and CSP I think is a pretty good program.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm doing a CSP actually starting next month in January. So I will be working with Healthcare Logistics, which is a medical supply company here in Columbus, Ohio. I would say the Army transition has been fairly easy for me. SFL TAP kind of has all of the resources that you could possibly want, whether you do it virtually or go to an in-person class for a week or so. But everyone has been very easy to work with. You reach out to them, they get back to you a day or two with what you need to do. I think the hardest part and what I'm kind of going through right now is the medical claim portion, which start that sooner rather than later. I kind of kicked the can down the road a little further than I should have. And so I'm kind of dealing with that right now. But the CSP program, I would definitely say, is a very welcomed like change that the Army has done. It really allows you to kind of see what you like to do, work with a company if it's a good fit. Then my company offered me a job. Some companies you can go and you can get your CDL license. You can go and get different classes and that kind of stuff to do whatever you want. So I definitely think it's a program that everyone should take advantage of. And the Army's done a really good job and DOD as a whole has done a really good job of kind of vamping that program to fit not just officers, but everywhere down to, the lowest listed soldier. So I definitely am happy with the way things have gone thus far.
And for the non-prior service portion of the audience, we do apologize for all of the acronyms. Okay, we're gonna talk in a lot of acronyms. That's the Army, right?
It's a different language.
We have acronyms for everything. So just Google CSP and all that. Sir, final words at all? Any advice you want to give anyone that's looking to join the Army as a commissioned officer?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say going the commissioned officer route is something you're called to. It's not something you really walk into. Like Madison said, she got there, she went to school to play soccer, but the one she got, and she realized what it was about. She's like, okay, this is who I am. This is what I can become. West Point will definitely prepare you for that. This is the best week of the year to be an Army fan because we get to beat Navy. And I'll do an old grad thing here. I'll quote Douglas MacArthur was a superintendent back in the day. And somebody asked him, like, hey, why do we make cadets play athletics? Why does everybody have to play a sport? And his response was, on the fields of friendly strife are sown the seeds that upon other fields, on other days will bear the fruits of victory. So that kind of encapsulates, hey, yeah, we play sports. Yeah, we're a school. But at the end of the day, you're here to commission, here to serve your country. You don't know where you're going to be called. If it's Iraq, Afghanistan, Korea, Japan, all of our graduates are all across the world doing great things for the country. And the Army's developed them to the point that they can do that.
When you sign up for this business, it is important that you mentally prepare yourself for a career in the Army, however short or long that you plan on staying. Thank you, Major Haas and Captain McGinn, for coming on to the first episode of Romeo Charlie Podcast. This concludes the show for today. If you are not already, do so. Follow us on Instagram at Army Recruiting Ohio and A Soldier's Diary. That is a.soldiers.diary, as well as our YouTube page, Army Recruiting Ohio, where we'll be uploading this full video of the podcast. If you're interested in how you can chart your own path in the United States Army, shoot us a DM to Army Recruiting Ohio on Instagram. Once again, I'm Sergeant First Class Williams. Thank you for tuning in. Romeo Charlie out.
Beat Navy.
Beat Navy.